Hi everyone! Today we have a very exciting video where we're gonna start a new bullet journal for the second half of the year and talk a little bit about the whole migration process from the old journal to the new one. But let's first address the elephant in the room, which is my gorgeous new notebook by Mellow. This brand is one that I've been eyeing for a while and I finally decided to give it a go. So the interesting point about their bullet journals is that they have 160 GSM dotted watercolor paper. I hope you can see from the close-up that the paper has a slight texture to it and it feels and looks so nice and high quality. It definitely gives a slight vintage look to this paper, which I'm actually really into. I also wanted to quickly show you a color comparison between my old notebook therapy journal and this new one. So my old journal has this very crispy white colored paper and the new journal has a slightly more ivory tone. I'll make a longer standalone review of this notebook after I've used it for a few months, but I'm very excited to see how it will perform with all my different paints. This purple is not necessarily my color, but it was the only color they had left when I purchased this, so oh well, it's actually very pretty in person and I think I like it much more than I thought I would. But I think that's enough chit chat about the notebook and now let's open it up and start setting up a cover spread. I usually skip this first awkward page that doesn't really open up fully, so we are starting from the first full spread here. I wanted this first spread to be some sort of intro to the theme. I also had one in my previous journal and I think I'll show you some quick footage throughout this video of what we set up in January and how we're gonna move that stuff into this new journal. So we're starting by immediately putting this new paper to the test by creating some gouache flower paintings on this spread. You can use pretty much any shades of blue, green, and yellow to mix some bright green tones. And then we're gonna need some yellow and red to create a range of orange shades for the hanging bell flowers. Then black and white are always a must to help adjust the other colors. I had sketched this flower very loosely with a pencil earlier, so we're able to jump right in with the paints. And we're first creating this simple background layer almost, where we're basically just defining all the leaf and flower shapes. I kept the green tone a little bit darker on the lower leaves and steadily kept adding more white and yellow to the mixture to make it brighter towards the top. So I wanted this whole setup to have a very fresh and summery feel to it. So we're gonna use these green and orangey peach tones throughout the whole setup. I feel like most of my yearly setups are pretty neutral, so I wanted to do something a little bit different and more fun this time. But anyway, after we have all the leaf and flower shapes, I then went over everything with a second layer to add some further details. So I blended a slightly darker and lighter color compared to the base layer and then used those to add some more lines and details here. Nothing fancy, but I think it still adds a little bit more polished appearance to the painting. I think this is also a good point to switch to a smaller brush, which will allow you more precision with these thinner lines. I was actually really pleased with how the paper worked with my gouache paints. I know it's way too early to draw any conclusions, but the slight texture really felt like painting on a regular watercolor paper, and there was almost zero wrinkling with the paper, which is also really nice. Anyway, after this first painting is done, I finished this page by writing this big 2023 title, and I also wrote my word of the year on this page. I leave the name of this bulky font I was using on the screen. We'll also use the same font for some titles later in the video. My word of the year is balance, which I didn't want to change from my previous setup, so I just copied it over here. But I did want to use another quote just to change things up a little bit. So I ended up writing, balance means doing enough, not doing it all, which perfectly captures what this word means to me. Then I decided to use the second page here to write the whole upcoming year in these small calendars. I don't refer to this page in my bullet journals that often, to be honest, but I think it looks really nice and somehow it's one of those staple pages that you just want to have in your calendar. But yeah, that's it for the intro spread, and now let's move on, and next we're gonna set up a future log. The future log is the place where you can mark any long-term plans. So let's say you have an appointment in a few months, but you didn't set up your bullet journal themes that far. This is the place to write it down so you won't forget it. I created this color palette and just printed these colors on white sticker paper. If you want to print these for yourself, I'll leave a link to the free section in my shop where you can find this color palette and many others I've done throughout the years. So if you have access to a printer, you can use the same colors if you want. So I wrote all the calendars to the top of the page from July to December, and then I cheated a little bit and used these letter stickers that are also from my own shop. I had a hard time deciding which font I wanted to use here, and I wanted it to look very clean because there's not much going on this spread, so having a very clean look to the letters just makes everything look very professional in my opinion. But after that, I always like to use the lower part of these pages to list some monthly statistics that are very fun to compare. So for me, this has a lot to do with my social media numbers, shop orders, and so on, but also other stuff like how many books I read, and the small arrows are related to my exercising app that I have on my phone. If you have any workout or hobby related goals, I think this would be a great place to track that because you can see the numbers change in a much longer period, which is much more realistic as well. Like, I think we all know that if you want to see an actual change in something, it doesn't happen overnight. You have to spend months and sometimes years doing it. Anyway, we left a little bit of room here at the bottom because I wanted to add some quick and simple leaf patterns. I didn't really think this through, to be honest, so I basically found these two Archer and Olive acrylograph pens that somehow hadn't still tried in my collection. Most of these pens I have actually tried and I should reactivate them to use them. But anyway, the colors kind of matched perfectly with the whole color story of this theme, and then I just drew some simple leaves. This was probably not the best pattern I ever came up with, but it's okay. I still think it did what it was supposed to do, which was adding some color and detail to this spread. Lastly, I wanted to add this orange stripe and a title to the middle of the spread because it still looked a little bit empty to me, and I think it definitely improved the overall balance of the colors and decorations. But I think that's enough about the future log, and now let's get into the section I'm always the most excited about in these yearly setups, which is the goals section. I'm someone who's pretty intense about setting goals. I just think that setting any type of outside expectations for yourself kind of forces some growth and adds some pressure in your life, because achieving pretty much anything in life requires you to at least sometimes step outside of your comfort zone. But before we talk about more about the goal setting process, you can see that I started this spread with a similar hanging flower painting. I wanted to keep the paintings very big in this theme so that they would add a lot of color and attention to these pages, and we wouldn't necessarily need to add many other decorations. I usually like to keep these yearly pages very simple and focus much more on the layout, designs, and the actual content of these pages rather than making very detailed paintings or anything like that. That's also one reason why I really like to use the colorful papers, because those are such a simple way to add something to the pages while still keeping everything pretty minimal. But after finishing the details here, we are then writing a goals title, and I used the same bulky font from earlier. I think the best trick to keep the letters as clean as possible is to line all the horizontal lines with a ruler. Now, of course, you could line all straight lines here with a ruler and get a very polished look to the letters. But if that's a little bit too much trouble for you, I think just having the letters on a straight line horizontally makes these titles very even. But anyway, what I wanted to focus on here was the actually useful stuff. So what I want from these pages is that I'm forced to sit down and look at my life or work or whatever it is in a more strategic way. That's something that I'm not very good at, and I kind of forget to do it in my real life because I have so many things I want to do and just jump from here to here without really thinking about it. So the yearly goals for me are something that consistently makes me come back to these few specific things that I need to remember to work on and keep moving forward step by step. So I think in the middle point of the year, it's good to start by reviewing and reflecting on the goals and the progress that happened or didn't happen in the first half of the year. Also, there might have been something that felt really important to you 6 months ago that kind of isn't so important anymore. So I think it's also a very good idea to take a moment and decide that you can throw that out and make more room for something that is much more important to you. When thinking about goals in general, I think a really good method is to do this reverse engineering. So you start by thinking, where would you like to be in life in 5 or 10 years? Or what is something that you'd really want to achieve in the long term? And when you have that image, we can then start to break it down into these smaller steps that we can start taking to reach that bigger goal. Again, I know, easier said than done. Something I've also realized about myself that some of you guys might relate to is that thinking about the future of my life and business kind of freaks me out a little bit. But because of that, it's even more important to face it, sit down every once in a while and have this very clear moment when you write those things down. So when you come back to these ideas after a while with a less clear mind space, you're reminded of the things that are actually important to you and that you should keep working towards. So yeah, on the next page, I just listed 3 numbers here. I'll fill all of this later for myself, but these would kind of be the top 3 things I would actually want to get done in the second half of the year. and making those as clear as possible is always a good thing. So I recommend trying to set goals that are very easily measurable. So at the end of the year, you can very clearly say that you either reached the goal or you didn't. Then, since there was some empty space left on the last page, I decided to leave that for some motivation and lessons I might come across. And I think this whole goals page is very good for any stuff like that. I think this goals section was pretty similar to my last one, which is something I actually wanted to keep this continuous feeling about my goals this year. But after that, we still have one section to go, which is the monthly budget section. In my opinion, taking charge of your money and budget is something that everyone should at least aspire to do. Now, if you're younger or you maybe still live with your parents or something like that, this section might look very different for you. But if you live on your own and are in charge of paying or at least contributing to paying the bills, I think having some sort of system to track all of that is very important. For me, the biggest thing that I want to get out of these budget pages is to have a summary of all the different funnels my monthly income is coming from. I work for myself, so that responsibility is on me, and my income also changes a lot from month to month. So this just helps me to keep track of all of that and see if I'm reaching my own goals when it comes to making a living as a small shop owner. I think having an income goal is probably the easiest to measure your success in a way, because as much as I hate the idea of, considering making a certain amount of money as being successful, there is still some truth to it. Like in my case, I know that if I want to be able to do what makes me happy in the long term, I have to be able to consistently make enough money from it to pay my bills and have some savings for the future, and that's what I personally see as success. So yeah, I think the budget section is very different for everyone because all of our situations are very different, but having some idea of how much is coming in versus how much is going out is very important to know to avoid any major financial problems in life. I know I'm kind of just talking random stuff in this video and not really talking much about the layout, because I think for the most part it's pretty self-explanatory. So I wanted to go with these colorful papers here again, and then I wanted to draw these leaf patterns to the sides of the pages. If you don't want to draw anything yourself, I think this would be a great opportunity to use some washi tapes or maybe paper patterns. But in the end, this type of simple leaf pattern is not that hard to do either. I think these types of leaves are so useful to throw in many different themes when you don't really feel like challenging yourself with the decorations, and instead you just want to go with something pretty easy and relaxing. But yeah, I know I didn't give you many specifics here about the money stuff because I think it's kinda more personal for everyone, but I hope you'll get at least some layout ideas out of this nevertheless. But yeah, that's actually all for my yearly setup this time. I really kept it simple and only included the spreads that I've seen myself using time and time again. I had a knitting section in my previous yearly setup, and I think I might miss it a little bit, but I felt like that would be something I could include on my monthly themes moving forward instead. Knitting is also a very slow hobby, so it's almost a little bit depressing to see how little progress there is on a monthly basis, for example. But anyway, I really hope this setup gave you some new ideas, and we will be back next week with the July setup, so I'll see you guys again very soon. Thank you so much for watching. If this was your first time here and you'd like to stay tuned for more, definitely consider subscribing. And I think that's it for this time. I hope you're having an amazing day or night wherever you are, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye bye!